So hello, welcome Renegade Inc., another talk show. I'm standing here with Leland Miller. Leland runs a thing called China Beige Book, and tell us about it.
I think everybody's realizing more and more that Chinese official data is insufficient. It's manipulated. Even if it's not transparent, and it doesn't cover enough data areas. So back in 2010, we decided to do something about that. We set up took us 2 years, and we set up our own private data operation across China, evaluating regions and sectors and the growth environment, the labor market, and the credit environment. So we have our own data coming out of what's one of the world's closed economies, and it tells quite often a very different story than what the official picture is.
Is the official data trustworthy?
It's unreliable. I think that if you use it as your only point of reference, then you're going to get yourself into trouble, because the Chinese are interested in stability. So sometimes they say things are better than they are, sometimes they say things are slightly worse than they are, but they don't like much variation. And so stability is the key watchword for them. That's what they're going for. The numbers are generally political numbers. They're not economic numbers. So they put out GDP growth targets and other numbers that they like to meet to show everybody that they're doing a good job. But if you're investing in China, that's very dangerous.
Would you invest in China at the moment? I mean, that's a ridiculous question as far as it's such a broad question. But what's the sort of landscape at the moment? Because there's an awful lot of talk about the West getting in there, them opening the market. Just give us a broad overview on where China stands.
Sure. Well, if you're looking at the stock market, then things are quite scary. I mean, you might, to some degree, the Chinese leadership appears to have put a floor on your downside, but at the same time, it's not a market anymore. You know, they're controlling sellers, they're controlling buyers, so you have to be really worried. You can still make a lot of money, but it's a casino. The real economy is different. There are sectors there that are going to be extremely prosperous going forward. There's others that are dying off, and you almost want to see the sectors dying off that are dying off.
Why?
That means the economy's changing. So it's no longer a manufacturing-led economy. You want to build up services. You want to empower consumers to spend more and build up retail. So there are parts of the economy that are going to be very, very good investments, but there's others that are not. And the key is having the type of data that will allow you to tell the difference.
So, and you specialise in that data, but just let me come to one point before we go dig deeper. Overcapacity in China and the sort of scar tissue, if you like, of the private debt binge. What's your view on it?
It's at outrageous levels, and they know that, and they want to do something to combat it. But in order to combat overcapacity, you have to shut things down. And when you shut things down, then you have defaults, and you have bankruptcies, and you have firings, and that affects social stability. So a lot of the time with the Chinese, it's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, maybe 3 steps back, and you never really know. It's a political issue as much as an economic issue. So they know where they want to go, but they're not very confident in doing it in a accelerated pace.
With the data that you collect, why is the government there so kind of benign? Because they accept you being there, and they actually use some of your figures. Is that right?
Well, we know they have our figures. I'm not sure how they get them, but I can imagine. Well, look, you know, what I think that they've realized is that we're telling an economic story, and one of the biggest problems they're going to have in the future is that people don't believe their data, or they're increasingly skeptical on any data
because
of
the closed mentality or the closed society.
Yeah, and there's no transparency, and then you set a GDP target at 7%, and then you have a quarter at 7% and another at 7%. It looks too perfect.
Right.
So the biggest problem they're going to have is people believing the data and having the confidence to take that data and invest. So I think one of the things they see in us is that we're helping Western China commercial relations by providing a baseline. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it allows people to make educated decisions on investing and operating in China.
With all the research that you've done, just give me a broad 5-year view from here to 2020 China. Where's it going, and how's it getting there?
Right. Well, there's 2 theories that are at the extreme ends, and one is you're going to see a collapse in the near term. I don't think that's going to happen. You also got this beautiful U-shaped argument where they're just having a little bit of a hard time now, and they're going to burst back up to 8 or 9 or whatever % growth. Right. Both of those are probably very wrong, especially the latter. What you're seeing is a long-term slowdown in China, and the best case scenario is they deal with that overcapacity. They stop building up debt. They stop stimulating to get places. They do all the things that will bring them slower, healthier growth, and China will emerge in okay shape at the end. If they don't do that, you're going to see a slowdown too, but it's going to be one that falls out of their control, and that's the hard landing.
Do they want to also, do the Chinese want to invest outside China? I mean, that's very much a theme. Are you seeing that?
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things is that people look at outflows and they think, well, the Chinese must think their economy's going to collapse because why are they investing in gold? Why are there such capital outflows?
Is that the right thinking?
Well, it's not that people there don't have some of those views, but the reality is that in China it's a closed capital account. You don't have many things to invest in, so you can't diversify your portfolio. So it's why the stock market, people flood into it. When that looks dicey, they flood back into property. There's not that many things to actually invest in. Yeah. A lot of these outflows are people trying to diversify their portfolio for perfectly reasonable reasons. So as long as you don't have an overwhelming run out of China or an overwhelming run into China, then there's no specific short-term warning signals from that.
So generally, as opposed to these two extreme views, you're taking a kind of more middle ground approach, or a third way, if you like. And you don't. Do you think there will be a soft landing from all that real estate speculation?
Well, people define soft landing and hard landing in different ways. You have to be very careful with the terms because they've become terms of art. But I would say yes, generally speaking, that if China does the right things and it's within their control to do them, then they will emerge in what would people think a soft landing. They will not have GDP at anywhere near the levels they have it now. Things will change, but they will be able to emerge with a different type of economy, but they'll emerge the other side. I think the major risk right now is that a lot of the emerging markets, a lot of commodity producers are banking on Chinese demand staying at its current levels, and they
not going to happen.
They are in for a rude awakening.
What's the most exciting thing that you've stumbled across when you've been sifting through the data?
Right. Well, everyone looks at growth data because GDP is a traditional metric, but we have not just credit data, credit environment data, formal credit data. We have bond issuance and then shadow banking data. So we're actually able to tell what people are paying in the informal economy over time and in different regions. And back in 2013, we called the interbank credit crunch 3 months before it happened. People said it couldn't, but when you have the actual credit data and you have time series for it, you can predict some of these headaches in China before they happen.
Wonderful. Leland, thank you very much. From here at Camp Kotok, lovely to talk to you. Great insight. We'll see you again soon.